doing a little count up. I've gotten the new tradition. Waldman has been singing "Staying Alive, Staying Alive." It's again, I feel like it's just like it's constantly. My brain does that. Like it defaults to songs, right? Like we were talking about how like restaurant business is in trouble, and in my brain I could hear, "Give me just a little more time,"
See, and then you with the cough drop. I mean, we could do like a Halls commercial.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. Breathe it in. Thursday night, live, Audible. Thank you, everybody. Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman, and um, the NFL it's paused right now. I know DeAndre Baker and Quentin Dunbar made the wrong kind of offseason news tonight, but I guess where we could start, Matt, first looking back because it has been just a few weeks since the draft, with some time for everything to cool, especially when we think about player team marriages. Is there anybody that you're looking at in a more positive or negative light than you did at first? Because with time, with perspective, with a little distance, a different picture has emerged.
it's there's probably some guys that I'm getting maybe a little bit higher on than where I was before. And I'd say that a guy like Antonio Gandy Golden is a guy that I'm starting to. I mean, I've been cautious about him, but I have a feeling that if Kelvin Harmon didn't do it for them, and they picked up Gandy Golden, that tells me a little bit that they're interested in finding a guy like Kevin Harmon, but better. So, and they may have gotten that there. So that's one of the guys for me. How about you?
Oh, Logan Wilson and Willie Gay. Just especially doing drafts gives me some clarity. They're players that as I go through the draft, I realize, I underestimated how good that could be when I started. You're doing the mental picture. I mean, in some ways, there's the literal picture of like the player in the uniform, but then there's just the idea of the role and the opportunity the player will have when you have a chance to think about it. Antonio Gibson too. Antonio Gibson and Devin Duvernay. Duvernay. The more I look at him, the more I see just a beautiful marriage of skills and like willingness, and a role in an offense and matching up with a quarterback's hot zone, passing in the middle of the field. So some of these second and third rounders on the second pass look almost as exciting as the guys who went in the top 50.
Yeah, and I like the Devin Duvernay pick for sure. And I actually think that there is going to be room for him to play from the backfield a little bit and do a little Danny Woodhead type of work. But the question for me is, Marquise Brown, does that mean does that mean that they looked at Marquise Brown and said, wow, he played at 155 last year? Because the truths that we hear is often, borrowing from our buddy Matt Harmon and really Josh Norris too. Josh Norris is the one who, some of these post-draft press conferences tell us the truth about what's going on here. And what kind of leaked out in this past 2 weeks is that Marquise Brown played at 155 and is trying to gain 20 pounds. So was that Duvernay pick because Marquise Brown is too small for their plans? What do you think of that?
Well, look, they had the luxury because they had 2 seconds, 2/3, 2 fourth-round picks to just take the players. And, Matt, I think this is a kind of drafting that you would certainly embrace if you were running a franchise. I'd be like, just take the guys that can play. And not just the guys that can play, but the guys that can play and are your kind of player that does a lot of the things that you ask a player to do for the role you're drafting them to I saw it was Doug Farrar's or something that was like, which quarterbacks are the best at making each throw on the field, right? Or each throw you would ask in an offense. And it just made my mind go to the conversation of, well, which quarterbacks based on that are the best and most misaligned with the things that their offenses ask them to do. So I think that teams that know themselves and know the players that work, like J.K. Dobbins was another pick like that, right? They didn't know J.K. Dobbins. But you and I both know that J.K. Dobbins can unlock some runs in the Baltimore offense, like Derrick Henry kind of runs, runs that Ingram can't give them. And I thought maybe Justice Hill will get a chance to, but I think that, obviously Dobbins jumps him in line. I mean, even Gus Edwards was ripping off longer runs last year than he was when he was a rookie. So they could just take luxury picks. I don't want to read too much into it. I'm excited for Marquise Brown too. I mean, I think it's clear that he wasn't close to healthy last year.
Yeah.
And just that unknown, allure of the unknown alone. Baltimore offense is just fun. I've started to do the rankings and then looking at the draft ADP. This is one of the things I did think about talking to you tonight about, Matt, is that usually you have that blissful ignorance where you're not totally aware of what everybody else thinks. And it's kind of something you would say, like, you shouldn't really care anyway. But I always try to locate my advice in early ADP trends. And it still feels like taking a quarterback in the second round this year, Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, is going to be fun, and I think the Baltimore offense, you're going to hear a lot of regression. They can't be that efficient. I see not something that to automatically bet against because of regression, but just to admire for its greatness. Those efficiency numbers. Anytime you automatically hear in like a numbers-driven community say there has to be regression, what it means is something remarkable happened, right? That's what we really want to get on our rosters. And when they keep taking players like Duvernay and Dobbins, I mean, that's going to make this offense remain remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that, there's a point where, the stupidity comes when it comes to this type of analysis in terms of how people react to it. And what I mean by it's kind of the same thing with what happens with us when I rank a player 7th on a board in a linear ranking and they go, "You hate that player." And it's like, no, the way I grade them, if you paid attention to my grading system, there's like quarter of a point between the 3rd ranked player and the 7th ranked player. It's literally like, if you take the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th player, I'm not going to have an argument with you if you take any of them number 3. That's enough for you to look at that. And if you were critical in your thinking, you go, "Oh, he really loves that 7th player,"
right.
But people will look at regression and they'll see regression and go, they'll say, "Oh, well, he's not worth it because it's got to go down." Well, it may have to go down to an extent. And yes, maybe you don't pick Patrick Mahomes number 1 overall in your draft because nobody picks quarterbacks that early in a normal draft. Anyhow, you don't take a quarterback in the first round. You understand the relative value of the position. But if I told you that Patrick Mahomes, despite the injury that cost him, 2.5 games, that should have been longer, that on a points per game level, he was still the 3rd ranked quarterback overall, despite not having Tyreek Hill for 4 games, and despite the fact that he was injured, and despite losing some of Sammy Watkins as well, and a rotation in the backfield. If I told you that Patrick Mahomes would be that good, if I told you before the season that all those things would happen, that Patrick Mahomes would be the 3rd ranked quarterback in points per game, you would have been happy with that.
Yeah.
But now we're looking at like, see, it's regression. It's not, you just shouldn't, it's not even worth it. He was not even really that good for us to even have to, and I think that the people who actually point out regression in an educated manner understand this, but sometimes people who read into this stuff, they overreact, when they do the People magazine version of looking at the analysis, that's what it ends up turning into.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, and I understand that it's the lowest hanging fruit. And there's a brand of fantasy football analysis that's like, if you get enough 55-45 bets, you'll come out ahead in the long run. Like these are these easily exploitable edges. And it's there for sure. But I mean, I feel like you're looking at the brush strokes and not seeing the painting. But either way, I'll probably still stand on the table for the second round being a quarterback or a tight end round, because it could be Kittle, it could be Kelsey, it could be Lamar Jackson. You want one of those players that just puts the rest of your fantasy league in a headlock at that position. Like one or two people are going to hang with you, and then also the running backs and wide receivers in the second round are kind of like not. There's a big drop off from first round running backs to second round running backs, and the second round wide receivers aren't that different from like the fourth round wide receivers. So I like it. Go ahead.
Look at it this way, Bloom. I agree with you. And I think it's, if you're in a league where you ask somebody what 11 personnel is and nobody in the league can tell you what that is, then you should be playing the odds. You can play the 45-55 with the bumpers on your all around your car, and the child leash and all of the all that stuff that we need in today's careful society, and you'll probably win your league playing the odds like that. But if you're playing against people like us, you probably if half the people in your league know what 11 personnel is, then you probably want to start taking a little bit more chances and trying to get edges and trying to go and win big, with certain picks, because if you just follow the herd of ADP, you're not going to be happy with your team. You're just going to have a mediocre team that hits all the marks, that looks good on your, looks good in August or right after the draft. And then you're wondering why you're, 4-8
right.
and you didn't take any chances, so, if you should be taking chances in your draft, so that way, if it doesn't work out, well, you still understand trades, you still understand with the waiver wire, you can work but the best way to get the edge early on is to have a strong draft and be able to maintain it. And a lot of people say, well, you can, the best way to have a good team is to draft a good team and be safe with your draft. And you can screw up your draft too. Well, yeah, if you want to play to not to lose, go ahead and do that. But I mean, that's it. It's just a wuss way to play, is the whole play not to lose thing.
Well, it's fantasy football,
Yeah.
I mean, you can color outside the lines in fantasy football. But I like tapping into those great players. I'll totally turn the page on it's funny, right? Because I'm writing, I wrote up tight end tiers. I'm in the middle of wide receiver tiers. I'm really trying to commune with what we can tell so far from early drafts of what people were thinking, and just try to find the slippage or the gaps. And I'll put this stuff out on Twitter, Matt. And I appreciate this. Believe me, at least one person will say, if there's a season, if they're going to play, and I get that. I absolutely get that. So jumping into fantasy analysis, let's talk about what we're going to do in our drafts. That hearing that reply makes it ring a little hollow. So I'm going to ask you something, but make it more specific, because you're one of the best when this kind of subject comes up. I was asking JJ Zacharyson in the last 10 minutes off the rail on the couch, what makes you nostalgic? Because nostalgia is big right now. But I want to ask you specifically, what makes you nostalgic about football, or what are some of your earliest memories as a football fan?
Wow. NFL Films Football Follies, when I was like 6-7 years old, when we'd go to a camp and things would get rained out and we had to sit in like this auditorium and they'd put the big projector on and we'd watch NFL Follies. That was one. Watching Ken Burrow 0-0 in Houston burn up and down the field as a deep threat. Watching Earl Campbell take on Jack Tatum and literally get, the people will, the kinder, gentler nation of us, and we understand that head injuries are a horrible thing and all of that. But back in that time, watching him literally get concussed on the field and still manage to get across the end zone by getting hit by one of the most vicious hitters in the game. It was like watching something primal and like it was like watching a comic book in real life.
Sure.
In terms of Earl Campbell and what he was about. Watching Greg Pruitt just basically run through his jersey almost every single week, the former Oklahoma running back who played for the Cleveland Browns. And if he didn't have 2 massive knee injuries, he might have been an unbelievable player, because he was a Pro Bowl caliber talent early on in his career who could make people miss. And, that was like in the 70s. And then probably like as a young adult, in the early 80s, I mean, getting a chance to watch Joe Montana and the 49ers and Jim McMahon and the Bears and seeing, seeing Eric Dickerson, and then seeing somebody like as great as Eric Dickerson was, seeing someone like, Darryl Green just catch him on a run that he had no business catching him on. Those are types of things that I'm nostalgic about. And just like going out with a couple of my friends, and we'd try and imitate boundary catches, like in our apartment, in our outside, like out in the yard, we'd pretend we were Steve Largent, or somebody like John Jefferson, because the way John Jefferson could sky and leap and do all the things that he did and part of that Chargers offense, that would have been fun to watch them with the rules today. Like if they had the rules today, that would have been a lot of fun. And then, those were probably, there's so many, but I mean, those come to mind right away. How about you?
Yeah, no, it's great to walk down this memory lane of particularly the things that enchanted you, that made you not look away. And you talked about pretending you were football players, right? Like how universal is that as children? And it's very deep. I mean, it's like mythological, it's archetypes, it's, Jungian, like we're going into some deep magics when in our head we're pretending to be one of these players that we saw on TV and trying to summon up and imitate them, I mean, did you read that Sammy Watkins article?
Yes, I did. I did.
My kind of dude. Words cast spells, right? Sammy Watkins said that. He's 100% correct. Words cast spells.
Yeah, sure.
Like we're all casting spells with our words, and we're casting spells in our head when we're pretending to be. For me, of course, it was Lynn Swan, right? Like growing up in the Pittsburgh area,
even in Cleveland, we did that.
Yeah, I mean, it was because even just Lynn Swan is the breakthrough of the mixing of like masculine and feminine with the ballet and how the ballet translated into his iconic moments. I mean, everything about that was memorable, special. And that's the thing that I was thinking about when you were recounting some of those memories. And absolutely, Earl Campbell was like out of a comic book. When you were saying that, it made me think of Bo Jackson. Similarly,
I remember Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and Earl Campbell.
Right.
Like Earl Campbell came on right after In Search of came on right after Earl Campbell, and I might as well have just mixed the two shows. And then I was drawing pictures of Godzilla, which might as well have been Earl Campbell.
Yes.
So I mean, it was all like melded into one thing, and then we'd go out and we play football. And like, to me, I wanted to be a power runner. So it was like, that was my gig as the kid in the neighborhood was that you could run for power. Could you stay up when everybody was hitting you or you're carrying that? Could you carry them,
Right.
So that was fun.
Yeah. He was like something out of like a folk tale, whatever, like the steel driving man, And a couple of things that just came into my head when you were giving that excellent rant, by the way, about to that moment. Because In Search of, I used to get up early before everybody else on Sunday mornings. I'd watch Underdog, the Transformers, of course. And if I got up early enough, I would see at 5:30 In Search of. It was like Leonard Nimoy. Yeah. It was like Unexplained Phenomena or otherwise like those corners of the universe. And of course, as a kid, like an 8, 9-year-old kid, 7-year-old kid, it was unbelievably fascinating. I used to copy sections of the encyclopedia about hurricanes and tornadoes and UFOs, like word for word,
Well, I don't know if I ever told you this, but Emery Hunt wrote a book, and I actually kind of mentioned this in the intro when he asked me to do the intro. When I was a kid, I used to skip school in elementary school. And so I used to, because I was
hooligan.
I had a single parent, I was a product of a single parent, and she had to go to work. So I figured out that there were things I wanted to read. I didn't want to read at first. So, my mom would sit me in a corner and make me read back to her until I learned how to read. So then I enjoyed reading so much at that point. And I enjoyed football so much that I'd go to the library and I'd find books on like football players like Sammy Baugh and Red Grange and Bronco Nagurski. And then it would go up to guys like Gale Sayers and all of the Dick Butkus and all the guys from like the 50s, 60s who were, great football players. And I would literally go to the library the day before, check out 3 or 4 books, and then I'd come home, and then my mom would go to work, and I would go to the bus stop, and I would then act like I didn't feel good, and I'd go back home, and I'd call my mom and tell her I wasn't feeling good, and I would sit there and read these football books to the bewildered parakeet that was sitting in the cage in our house. So I'd sit there all morning and just read books about football players, in like 2nd, 3rd grade. That was kind of like that was kind of my once a month kind of thing that I would try to do. So I always had the illness, and football was part of that. I mean, because you had kids in the neighborhood always played it, and Cleveland, Pittsburgh was the team back then, but Cleveland, everybody in Cleveland was still talking about guys like Jim Brown and Otto Graham and the rich history. And I'd been to the Hall of Fame before I even turned 7 years old. So it was like football was a big deal. And reading about it, just, skipping school to go read about it was just something that, was fascinating. So,
of course. Captain Hoogie Face says, cut school to go to the library. That's classic Waldman. Perfect. Really, if I was going to write your origin story, if I was some sort of inventive writer and I was going to write your origin story, I probably couldn't have come up with something that fitting or on the nose.
I grew up playing football and reading about football. Like I played football every day till I was about 18 years old. Even if I played music, I'd go out and get my friends and we'd go play. We'd play the football team. I mean, it was like it was great.
Playing sports was definitely a big part of my childhood. Not organized sports so much. I think the last time I played organized sports was 8th grade basketball, like the Brownson House League in Washington County. It's one Jerry Sandusky's parents owned it.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, and I think he was around there at the time, and I was a child. Anyway, but we would play street hockey, especially after the Penguins started doing their thing
with the orange ball.
Yeah. The tennis courts, take the net down. We'd play pick up basketball games. We would play. We'd mess around with like home run derby up at Carmel Park. My little hometown claim to fame is that Kraft Caramel in the 50s had a contest, and the town that could send in the most caramel wrappers would get a baseball field. And Bentleyville, Pennsylvania won.
Nice.
It's just a little coal mining town, like a few thousand, like 1,000, 2,000 people, and on the bluff, like the highest point in town, is Carmel Park. You have to drive up like a switchback to get to it. You play home run derby up there, but it absolutely was like all getting out there, and we kind of created our own tapestry, but always in the background, like you're saying, we're invoking these players, and we had some really incredible teams that were very different from each other, right? Like you mentioned the 85 Bears, those 49ers teams. Those teams couldn't be more different. You know, or I mean, you mentioned Darryl Green. I think of the Smurfs, that Washington team that won. One of the most iconic moments I can remember.
Yes.
A lot. It's John Riggins. Like that Earl Campbell, John Riggins. Like that moment. That was like pulling the thunderbolt out of the heavens, and like smiting your opponent.
And to think a mohawk was a crazy thing to have at that time.
That's the whole thing, man. 70s were a different time. It was Stevie Wonder's birthday yesterday.
Yeah.
And I was going back and listening to the Stevie Wonder catalog,
We were listening to YouTube about him not being blind and having fun about that.
He plays along with that too. I think he has
fun
with that too.
He
absolutely does. And those songs weren't tame in any way as far as, it was the 70s were a time, and I don't know, maybe we'll be getting more and more into a more outspoken time. One of the other things I wanted to say about what you were going on there is that coronavirus is Godzilla, right? I mean, it's the same thing.
See, there you go. I mean, we're joking with my daughter who may get stationed in Hawaii, that she's gonna, we're like, well, what do drone operators do in Hawaii? And my son who's staying with us right now, who was a drone operator in Iraq, he was like, they go search for Godzilla in the ocean, I guess, So we're the joke is that that our daughter's going to keep tabs on Godzilla so it doesn't get out of control. So we'll see.
Right. Oh no, there goes Tokyo. All right, I should get us back to football. Although there was football in there. Nah, but it is something like without things happening, we go back to a time when like we created a world around ourselves, and as kids, it just came naturally.
Yeah. Can I ask you about something?
Please.
All right.
Get us somewhere.
Yeah, because we're looking at I'm looking at your off-season tight end tiers.
Yeah.
And one of the guys that stuck out to me is Tyler Higbee.
Sure.
Tyler Higbee, you have him as a strong tight end, one with skepticism. Right. So tell me, what was it about December that you remember that you're just like, I mean, obviously you said he was elite last year in December, so the stats obviously back that up, but what was it that you saw that you're just like, okay, I have to put him this high up here, even though I'm a little skeptical?
Well, it's the relationship, right? And look, I liked Higbee coming out of Western Kentucky. He wasn't Travis Kelce, but he had a little bit of that edge to him, I mean, I know you know what I'm talking about, Waldman. When you see a tight end who, and we could also say Jawan Jennings has this kind of quality too, like dudes that like going over the middle of the field, right? They kind of relish the opportunity for the havoc and chaos and mayhem there. And Tyler Higbee had that like mean streak to his game, and he was a very adept receiver, like fluid enough, even though he was probably powerfully built. And Higbee was one of those guys that was on and off my dynasty rosters for the last 3 years, because usually you'll have a spot or two to just pick up somebody, but there's no hope of anything happening. But you have that feeling about them, you have that belief in them, and then of course, like he really came around whenever he wasn't on any of my rosters. So that's probably part of it, some weird psychological thing. But really, I just think that Jared Goff had such success throwing to him, and it was a time when I think the Rams offense that we saw at the end of the year is much more like what we're going to see going forward than the offense we saw at the beginning of the year.
Yeah,
And
I agree with that.
And I want to say, well, I mean, geez, Higbee was producing on the level of anybody, Kelsey, Kittle, Ertz. So you're already pricing in the discount that could he do it again because it was someone unexpected for a short period of time. And he looked like what I had hoped he could realize in the NFL, an adept receiver as far as ball skills and, being able to find spots on the field, but also a tough, rugged guy, a good blocker, a good every down tight end. And they gave him that extension earlier in the year. So I think they had clarity on him over Everett very early in the year. So I think that there'll probably be some drafts. But here's the problem in draft practice, by the way. The 5th, 6th round, the 4th, 5th, 6th round, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round are wide receiver rounds. Like the quality of wide receivers from the 2nd round to about the 6th round is you can get excellent receivers in the 6th round this year. Guys you're happy to start every week. So that just might be a time that I'm not looking where he's going to go, although he's still falling to the 7th, 8th, 9th round. But I do think there's skepticism that he's going to keep doing what he was doing, but it was so reliable and efficient. I just feel like the die has been cast. It's probably why I see people putting Cooper Kupp in the top 12 receivers. It's funny, I forget sometimes, like, how could Cooper Kupp be in the top 12 receivers? And he's actually consensus like number 10 or number 11, I think, in some places. Right. But in the second half of the year, he was an entirely different receiver. This offense used him like, it was almost like instead of magnifying his effect, his role just became less important in the offense. And also it's telling that they drafted somebody who plays basically Van Jefferson can do what he does, I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So thinking, on one point and then another question about this, like I will say now that we're talking about tight ends, I realize who I imitated for many, many years was Ozzie Newsome. I wanted to be Ozzie Newsome when I grew up. So there you go. And maybe even more ways than one now that I think about it. But Darren Waller, short of you and I going back in time to that time that we ran into John Gruden in the elevator at the, in New York, and us going back to that time to basically grab him, mug him, and tell him, Darren Waller, no matter what, when you remember this moment because you could have died in this elevator. And short of us doing that, going back in time to do that, tell us the story of what's going to need to happen for Waller to meet his value.
I guess everybody. I mean, Tyrell Williams and Hunter Renfrow and Henry Ruggs being hurt. I think. Just because I'm not taking anything away from Waller because he played really well, but a lot of his usage I think was more by necessity. And Tyrell Williams started off the year, and Brian Edwards is there too. Williams started off the year pretty good, strong, and then got hurt, tried to play through it. So he's gonna, I think, provide more impact. Hunter Renfrow is playing his best football at the end of the year, and then there's Henry Ruggs, who obviously they're going to force feed the ball. So and that other thing about Waller is he's not this go-to red zone target. He's not really someone who's used a lot in the red zone by Derek Carr. So, we'll see. That whole Raiders offense is so difficult. I was talking about this on another show I did this week. They've got everything in place except the quarterback, And
they won't if they switch one out for the other either.
No. So it's just hard. So I still always come back to this thing, Matt, of teams and offenses. and who's going to produce overachievers and who's going to produce underachievers. And the Raiders, as long as the quarterback doesn't inspire confidence to really unlock the value of everything else in this offense, it's hard to want to put chips. Josh Jacobs is one that everybody has. I don't know exactly how high in running back rankings, but he's at least a good round and a half or 2 rounds in my rankings. Like I'm nowhere, and it's not that I don't like Josh Jacobs. I love Josh Jacobs as a player. I love him as a player, but I just feel like this Raiders offense is, even though he's not underachieving, it's just difficult to want to put chips on them. So Darren Waller's like top 5, top 6, and again, if you're going to take a tight end that early, I just don't think he's the one.
Yeah, I can see that. And I would definitely be a Josh Jacobs guy just because I think that the line is good and that's going to be the one thing that drives it. But I think the reason that Waller hasn't been a red zone guy is that they used Moreau a lot there in the red zone.
And then they got Jason Witten this year.
Yeah, so you're going to see Witten being moved into that realm. Do you think that John Gruden doesn't understand? Like, the thing about John Gruden that bothers me isn't so much his schemes. Like, his schemes don't bother me when everybody was getting on that. It's that he undercuts his good players.
Yeah.
Like, he's always like, there's like Seattle who encourages competition, and there's John Gruden who like literally chops the knees out from under his best players and doesn't really expand what they do. And it's kind of, he needs somebody. I kind of feel like he needs somebody to tell him to like just like sit in the corner, and stop acting like the way you do. Like, he just needs a good advisor to tell him like you're going too far, but so yeah, Waller's an interesting one for sure. And I can see where you're coming from with that, because he seems to be a guy that works well between the 20s, not inside, and they're not using him inside the 20s.
Right.
So yeah, that's one.
And the real answer at tight end, since we're talking about this article, is I think Kelsey or Kittle in the second round is fine. And if you're not going to do that, then you can get guys like Hayden Hurst and Blake Jarwin, and you can double up, right? I mean, you can take some of the more aspirational plays. Mike Gesicki, I think even Dallas Goedert is still going around like 10th tight end. So you can try to catch some upside on some of these guys. Jonnu Smith is cheap. You just throw a couple of darts at players that you can tell a credible story that they're going to have a good year.
I like your boring but potentially safe weekly plays because I actually think that they'll be better than boring. Like I think Austin Hooper in that offense is gonna, he's actually a good above the rim player, but Matt Ryan never uses players that way. You don't even use Julio Jones that way very often.
No.
So when you don't even use Julio Jones that way, it's on your quarterback. So, Baker Mayfield's going to throw it up to a guy like Hooper. I think Hooper's going to have a good year. Olsen with Russell Wilson. Yeah, this is going to be like Greg Olson's going to be like, how do I put 5 more years on my career?
Sure, right.
Like, I mean, it's good, so I feel like that could be a nice combination there. But I get where you're coming from. I mean, you got the young guys who are really rolling there in terms of their ability to grow into this.
Yeah, I'm always looking for that elusive potential, and that's what excites me.
And there are a lot of good ones. I mean, like you mentioned some good ones.
Look, you do the tango and you pick one. Hooper, I think, is going around like 11th, 12th tight end, maybe even a little bit earlier. I mean, Hooper's not going. It's interesting. The fantasy football hive mind acknowledges that Hooper is not going to be what he was in Atlanta. Tight end 9 is where he's at in the ADP.
Yeah, I'll bet against that one. I'll bet against the hive mind.
Yeah, I mean, like Rob Gronkowski and Tyler Higbee are the 2 tight ends bracketing him. And what do you think about Gronk this year, by the way?
I'll take him. I mean, come on now. He's going to be working in the red zone. I like what they'll do with him in the red zone. Is he going to, at that late of a round? I'll take my chances with him in that late of a round.
Right now, 8th tight end, 82 overall. Like, you're taking him over options like Matt Ryan or Carson Wentz, a quarterback, over like Kareem Hunt. You'd have to, forego someone like Kerryon Johnson or Marquise Brown. Actually is right around the
same. I'll gladly do all of that because carry on DeAndre Swift. What's going on there?
Right.
Matt Ryan, he's irreplaceable.
J.K. Dobbins, Damian Williams. These are some other players like around Rob Gronkowski.
Those are guys that, again, like if you're if you're going for that bulk and trying to add a number of players, I get why you wouldn't take Rob Gronkowski over some of these options that you're going to take dart throws at. But they're all, you're basically, you're basically hoping that one of those guys that you pick, because you're only going to get one of them, right?
Right.
In that range, maybe two. That two of those guys, maybe somewhere between game 5 to game 7, are going to get in the lineup, be the lead back, break out, or remain the lead back like Kerryon Johnson, and have a strong season and not be forced into some committee situation. Whereas with Gronk, you're kind of like, he's either has it,
right,
or he's basically
you're
a situational guy, and I'd rather take a chance on that. I mean, I
Sure.
love that.
Yeah, I think that I continue to come back to this starting point anytime I think about these fantasy football things of you should always be taking players who can can easily overachieve, like outproduce what you pay for them. It's like the 55-45 thing. Nah, like I want somebody who I can at least imagine. That's why Hayden Hurst or Blake Jarwin. I mean, these are the names that come to mind right away when I think of upside. And I think that you're right that Gronk has that. Like I almost forget, it's almost like a dream, right? Because it happened after coronavirus, so it almost is like a dream that Gronk is really coming back and playing football. Like wow, he's actually going to do it, and he could be reinvigorated. That year off and that chance to renew himself. By the way, Clyde Christensen did an interview this week, and did you read it?
No.
So he did an interview this week, and he said, "Now when Peyton was a free agent." Peyton was going to take like down to the nomenclature, the offense with him. That was one of the things he was looking for. There's someplace he could come and basically say, "We're going to run my offense." But he said Brady's going to run the Arians offense with Brady influence. And he said that Brady has been really good about coming in. This is a quarterback coach, coming in and saying, "What do you want me to do?" That's what Brady's saying. Just tell me what you want me to do. Thoughts?
Listen, I don't think it's that much of a stretch. I mean, there's a lot of play action into that. So that's fine. You're going to have some intermediate throws. But to say that big thing is the Brady version of the offense. Well, I mean,
with Brady influence,
there's going to be a whole hell of a lot of a Brady influence on that. I mean, come on. To me, it's like, how are you? I don't know. It's kind of like saying we cook, we're going to an Italian deli and we're going to have, and Mario Batali is going to be the guest chef. Now he's going to make what's on the menu, but with his influence.
Right.
I mean, Come on now. I mean, there's going to be some major differences here. So I don't think I just don't think it's going to be something where we can look at it and it's a 1-to-1 look, but it's a fascinating, consideration because Tom Brady isn't Carson Palmer in terms of what Carson Palmer did in that Arizona offense,
right?
Years back when they had a quarterback who was, at least had near elite qualities at times, So, I'm kind of just curious too about some guys here. What do you make of somebody like N'Keal Harry? Have you completely given up on him, or are you thinking that all this nice? Oh, he's working so hard.
Yeah.
You think that's gonna
I wouldn't use the word completely when I would say giving up on him, but I'll say this: everything about his rookie year aside, which we should not necessarily sweep aside. It wasn't exactly an auspicious rookie year for him. I feel like New England becomes a fantasy wasteland now. I mean, I don't see. I mean, already when we were watching football last year, leaving aside an offense like the Steelers, or when teams like Detroit had quarterback play fall off a cliff, of offenses that were roughly what they were envisioned, the Patriots offense was one of the worst offenses in the league. Grody, I mean, it was just terrible. It was futile. Watching, sometimes it felt like it was a major accomplishment for them to get a first down when you're watching the Patriots offense last year. I get it, Antonio Brown, and I still say some of it's the curse of Antonio Brown. But, and Josh Gordon, like they had a different picture, a different plan when the season started and Mahomes had got hurt. But if you switch from Brady to Stidham, oh my, I mean, that offense is going to crater.
Yeah, I mean, there's a very good chance that that's the likelihood there, and it is interesting because I just think about it from another fact that's not really even football oriented. Is just that I could see how for the first time in 20 years, Patriots fans and NFL fans are all going to be rooting against Brady in Tampa Bay. I mean, like it may be one of those situations where they might be thinking, is this going to be the creamsicle days of the Bucks, in terms of how bad they were when they were back in the day wearing those uniforms. But speaking of other players, just curious, I'm looking at Chad Parsons' article here, his 2020 wide receiver breakout candidates. And, certainly, if we're going to get technical, some of these guys have already, quote unquote, broken out. But again, we're talking about looking for guys who can be wide receiver one producers for 2020. So Chad defines this very well. So if you read the directions, you won't be complaining about it. So, but from this standpoint, one of the candidates that he has listed here that I'd love to get your take on is a guy like Darius Slayton. Are you a believer in Slayton, or did you think that he was just kind of a product of everyone getting hurt?
No, I believe in Slayton. I mean, I think Slayton a la DJ Chark last year. Like Slayton and Chark are both guys that you could have watched in college and say, like, they're live athletes, but the finishing details weren't always there in their game. And lo and behold, Slayton, it's his rookie year, Chark, it's last year. They just seem like it's almost like when someone gets the right prescription glasses or something, just like, oh, wow. And I think Slayton has got that. And I think Slayton has chemistry with Daniel Jones too. But here's where it's harder for me to dial in and what to do about the Giants in fantasy leagues. Saquon Barkley, if you draw the number 2 pick, and then you're probably going to take Saquon Barkley. If you don't draw the number 2 pick, you're probably not going to get him. Daniel Jones is interesting. His fantasy season last year, Matt, wasn't very different from Aaron Rodgers. If you look at their point plot outlook, very similar. Daniel Jones had some massive games.
He did.
And they got Andrew Thomas, so now you got Thomas and Solder. That's good. But they do have like a cup runneth over in terms of fantasy issue with Ingram and Tate. Tate's still very good. Tate was playing great last year. Sterling Shepard, he's excellent. I mean, he's very underrated as far as the level that he's playing at and his reputation around fantasy circles. Evan Ingram, if he stays healthy, and of course Barkley is a receiver out of the backfield. I think it comes down to this. What do you think of Jason Garrett? Like when I say Jason Garrett, offensive coordinator, and again, coronavirus offseason, so that caveat. What do you think of what he can do with this, and if he can put Daniel Jones in a good spot? Because I also have this nagging feeling that like next year, this team could be in the market for another quarterback. And they say like, okay, now we're going to get another quarterback, new regime. And this is kind of a make or break year for Daniel Jones, even though it's not being set up that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think Daniel Jones is a fraud, but I do. I mean, I'm doubling down on it. There was nothing I saw from his play last year that made me think I've changed my mind. Watching him, he was tone deaf in the pocket. He was lucky he didn't get killed a couple of times, and as the season progressed, he got worse, and in key areas that were issues with him at Duke. So I look at Jones in this particular situation, and I think that he's headed for just another Mariota Trubisky crater, which is and maybe we'll add Baker Mayfield to that mix as well this year. I mean, I'm there. I don't see I was on clevelandbrowns.com last year, mid-year, and they asked me what I thought of Mayfield, and I said, here's the deal. He's Jeff Garcia. That's what he's aspiring to be. And I'm not talking about the Jeff Garcia that the Browns fans hated, but the one in 49er land when he was actually a Pro Bowl player. That's what he's aspiring to try and become. So, and I think if he can't make it with the Stefanski club, there, the Browns are going to be in the market for another quarterback as well. But this is, again, it's tough playing this position, and I think that Daniel Jones has a ways to go before I'm convinced of that. I'll tell you another team that I think is going to fall apart a little bit, maybe not completely apart, but I have a little worry about them, and that's the 49ers.
Oh,
because see, And I know that's an O thing, like that would be an O like on Twitter. Like if I put this on Twitter, I'd probably have Doug Farrar going, "Oh." So, because Doug's famous for that, but the reason that I'm saying that is that when you look at the loss of Andrew Staley, didn't he retire? So they have Staley retiring, along the offensive
Staley,
line.
yeah.
They don't
Trent
have
Williams, though. They got Trent Williams.
They did get Williams. And Williams, if he can stay healthy, though he's had some issues, and the fact that he's, he's terrific in the run game, but I worry about Garoppolo. I worry about that pass rush and the fact that name a receiver who's a veteran on that club, like a good full-fledged route runner who's a veteran who actually can be where his quarterback needs him to be. And you can't name a single receiver outside of George Kittle who fits that description. They're all young guys. And that team was kind of floundering a little bit on offense because they didn't have a guy like Emmanuel Sanders, and they didn't go get anybody who's Emmanuel Sanders. Sorry, Brandon Ayuk is not that guy. Jalen Hurd could have benefited. All those guys that are in that lineup could have benefited from another year or two of Emmanuel Sanders kind of kicking their tail into what's going on here. I mean, I don't think this team. I think this team's going to be like 2 to 3 games worse than they were last year.
Yeah, well, Super Bowl curse, and which really I think represents the idea. Super Bowl loser curse is like this idea that when you sum it up that much and you come up short, it's hard to do it again. And the Garoppolo, I brought up the thing about the doubt, that moment of doubt that I think now he has, and they had no struggle in the playoffs at all until that time. They were just rolling through the playoffs. They just rolled through Minnesota, rolled through the Green Bay, and good.
And they took away his best receiver.
Right.
They took away
the guy who was wide open that he missed.
Yes, they took him away. Now
wasn't that an iconic moment, by the way? I mean, the most iconic moment of that Super Bowl wasn't Mahomes to Hill.
Yeah.
On 3rd 15, it was Garoppolo missing Sanders.
Yeah, and now and I don't think Drew Brees is going to be missing Emmanuel Sanders all that much when they hook up. I think Emmanuel Sanders is basically the key that unlocks the lock for the Saints to be able to be Super Bowl bound. I think, Emmanuel Sanders and Mike Thomas, are you freaking kidding me? Like, I wouldn't take another wide receiver duo over those guys if Drew Brees was my quarterback. That's just ridiculous how good these guys run routes, and the fact that they can play multiple positions. They can get rid of that Traquan Smith noise, which is kind of like great athlete, makes nice jump catches, still hasn't figured out how to run more than like 2 routes. And I'm kind of a little hyperbole there, but still, and if Troutman like actually shows what he shows as a small school guy, they could probably go 2 tight ends with Troutman and Cook and still be ultra dangerous, and then spread them out and bump the formation out into empty, and that's going to be crazy to have to defend if Troutman actually plays well early on. And if he doesn't, they're okay because they still have other guys that they can mix and match with, because as we've always known, Drew Brees can make bad wide receivers look like competent starters. I mean, the way that he's played. So it's to me, I mean, I just look at the 49ers and I think they may limp their way into the playoffs, but I don't think they're taking that next step because Deebo Samuel couldn't get off press last year. Brandon Ayuk can't get off press.
No.
Dante Pettis can't get off press.
No.
What are they? To me, this is one of those. It's like, Kyle, did you like get into the Bill Belichick? Like, I only draft one type of receiver, and that's all I do, and they're not good enough for you to give you what you need in terms of a full-fledged, depth chart. To me, that was like the weirdest move, was to get rid of Sanders and not replace him with somebody competent, to begin the year.
Self-scouting, right? Talk about the self-scouting.
Yeah.
I like that though, man. Daniel Jones is a fraud. I almost went right to Twitter and just to quote Daniel Jones is a fraud. Matt Waldman. I thought maybe that's not a nice thing to do. I loved it though. I loved it.
Well, I already have the Giants staff. I mean, like Big Blue Review. I don't remember his name, but I'm on his show. Great guy. But the guy who runs Big Blue Review. 2 weeks after Daniel Jones, what do you think now? And I'm like, the same thing I thought when I scouted his ass. Like, it was like he's still He's still tone deaf. He's still all these things.
Exactly. So it's you can draw a line. You said Trubisky and Mariota, and Mayfield, maybe Jones, maybe. And I feel like the common thread is the quarterback has to get meaningful instructions from the visual information that he's gathering, that he acts on instantaneously, and that is the essence of the quarterbacking position. And like Tua is one of those quarterbacks that like the first time you watch him, you're like, whoa,
yeah,
oh, he's got it. He actually like engages with the game in a way that the game is speaking to him.
Processing speed and confidence.
Well, and the validity of what you see, because you can
right.
process quickly, but
that's right.
not actually get a valid outcome.
Hit the mark, hit the mark. No conscience about it whatsoever.
Yeah, it's really a mental, emotional position more than a physical position.
It's a performance position.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, it sets up some of these good storylines if there is a season. Kenny pops. By the way, let's do the lock. Let's dump on lock.
No, I'm not dumping on Lock. Like last year, I'm Drew Lock. It may, we need another year to see how he is. But I liked what I saw last year from him overall. He had some moments where he tried to do the Mahomes light thing and it fell flat, kind of like a flat bottle of Corona Light, I guess. But, he overall, they're putting weapons around him. And I thought he had better precision in terms of how he moved. He wasn't doing the whole, I can get on the field and, do the hangover version of myself and, in Missouri and get away with it against everybody but the top SEC teams. I think he actually came to work and came to play, and it showed up for him. So as long as he doesn't have that, I've made it in the league like Sammy Watkins, who said he was getting drunk every night and he just finally figured out that he needed to learn how to run routes last year. He said he finally figured out how to run these routes and work on releases, and he never worked on this stuff before, and that he finally worked on it this time last year. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Yeah. So that's as long as Locke doesn't do that, he's going to be fine.
It should be. Yeah, it'll be fun. I mean, it's what the Broncos have done and set up a lot of anticipation, especially with the community there and how they embrace them. And
it's not Mayfield Part 2. I don't think it is.
No, I saw somebody through the name Jay Cutler out there, and I know Denver connection and all that. But I could see some of that. And Cutler wasn't a failure. Cutler wasn't necessarily a success either. But what Cutler did translated well enough.
Cutler was sabotaged by Josh McDaniels. We've told this story,
right?
Well, when the GM who told me the story, he read the riot act to Cutler, and Cutler turned and looked at his agent on the first phone call where he got read the riot act for about how he sucked and got cursed out and treated like he was like a piece of garbage. And he turned and looked at his agent and said, "Get me out of town." And the Bears thought they were getting a polished starter. And as we've seen, the Bears haven't picked a good quarterback since Sid Luckman and Vince McMahon or Jim McMahon. So,
right. Yeah. It's so funny. And this is me, and this is my obsession, that as we talk, like 4 different times in the show, I'm not kidding, Matt, Cam Newton just comes into my head, like he's up there in the corner smiling, the Raiders, the Bears, these teams,
the 49ers,
the 49ers. Oh my God, Cam Newton, a healthy Cam Newton. No, of course, because it's some of the same teams, the Patriots, right? The Patriots,
the Cleveland Browns,
right? They're the same teams that you think about for Aaron Rodgers, right? They're the same teams when you say Aaron Rodgers is going to play somewhere else in the next couple of years. Where is he going to play? These are the 2 players that can change the destiny of franchises potentially. Or we can just find out that their flaws are defining them more than their greatness now, and we have that to look forward to.
Dear God, I wish I know it won't happen, but it wouldn't have been fun like if Cam Newton were still healthy and at his full range. Cam Newton in a wishbone with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb and the Cleveland Browns and no wide receivers. Just get rid of Beckham. Just get rid of Higgins. Get rid of and just like just watch them run all over everybody. That'd be kind of fun, but for an old guy like me. But anyway, that's not realistic at all.
We may see something like that yet, though. Maybe at some point.
Here's a guy that I wonder about for you, that just kind of like, I'm kind of coming around on him, and that's Denzel Mims. Like, I love Denzel Mims, but him going to the Jets kind of scares me.
Right.
And it's kind of like, it's this whole thing. There's Denzel Mims, and then there's the gravitational suck of like all those players who've never done anything on that wide receiver depth chart. And does he get influenced by them, or does he have the work ethic? Like, it's been, I've had some readers send some stuff to me and go, some of the puff pieces that are out there about how his coaching staff says he's a great worker and he's such a focused guy. Is he going to be like Michael Thomas and like, use the afterburners to pull his way out in front of that depth chart and be a star? Or is he going to get sucked in by the gravitational pull of guys who underachieve?
Right. Yes. It's Adam Gase, right? Adam Gase is looming over this whole conversation, right? The Jets are like when you buy a ticket to go into Adam Gase Funhouse, like taking any, right? Like taking any Jets player.
Pennywise.
Right. Taking any Jets player, you're subjecting yourself to the influence of Adam Gase. And then you also have Sam Darnold. And I mean, I'm not trying to say anything negative about Sam Darnold, but when you think of Sam Darnold, there's kind of like he seems like a deer in the headlights. Like the mono thing really fits well into his mythology now, right? Like he just seems a little bit, and especially with an influence like a personality like Gase, like he's going to continue to seem like a neophyte, like young and green, and it's not going to allow him or this offense to really step up to another level. And then, wide receiver, Perryman was looking good so I'm fascinated with Perryman. I'm fascinated with Crowder. I'm fascinated with Mims. But at the same time, I just feel like, because how can Mims be better than Robbie Anderson at this point? I mean, Mims could be better than Robbie Anderson in a few years, but rookie Mims isn't going to be better than fourth-year Robbie Anderson. And what did he do last year? So he came on at the end of the year. But who wants to be part of Adam Gase? Like, who wants Adam Gase to have any influence over anything that happens to their fantasy team?
I just see a red balloon near a sewer grate, literally,
exactly,
with a
Jets, don't follow
with a jet sewer grate top, like the little manhole cover with the JETS Jets. Yeah, and
right. The Jets and the Browns. There's these teams like the Jets and the Browns and the Lions. You know, that just like giving them your heart. And there's a lot of things you can get out of football that are personal and fulfilling as far as like the way it reflects relationships in your family, like watching games with your family or your friends, or going to the games, or just the role it plays in your life. But as far as giving your heart over to these teams and these organizations, it has just been so empty. That's what I think of when you throw the red balloon. Is like the disappointment, of just giving your heart over to these teams that are really kind of incompetent organizations.
Yeah. Well, so, here's to Cleveland, maybe having a shot this year. We'll see in terms of like turning things around a little bit. Well, I think they're close, but we'll see.
They're closer than they have been for a while.
Yes.
At least getting everybody on the same page. And I know that I can say, like, Detroit fans, Browns fans, Jets fans would say, I would love to be, let down again this fall, if there's a season.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always in the background, but still, we like it. We like swimming around in football. Like Matt Waldman, man, you're bringing the heat. It's great because that's what. Look, it's boring just to fence it and just describe things in such a way so that you're not at all saying anything meaningful or making a projection. And I think you're absolutely right to draw a line from Trubisky and Mariota to Jones and Mayfield, and then that implicates what's coming next for these franchises. And I think they're probably thinking that on some level. So it's fun, man.
Case Keenum, they brought him in Cleveland. I mean, and I look at that and I go, Case Keenum can run that offense pretty darn well. So I'm okay with that as a bridge. So
yeah, we'll see. It's good. It's spicy. We'll keep things spicy here on Thursday nights. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Cecil, we miss you. Everybody out there, make sure you're staying safe, wearing your mask, washing your hands, social distancing. Get back.